In this video, I'm going to show you a model for how you might think about adding positive and negative numbers, and then from then you could come up with your own rules or use the formal rules. But let's get a picture of what it means to add positive and negative numbers. First of all, what about if we took a positive number like 3 and we represented it, let's see, I'm not going to put equals, I'm going to represent it with just some plus signs. So if there's 3 plus signs, that means -3. And let's say, for instance, I wanted to represent -5. I could represent that with 5 negative signs. Okay? Now, what about the number 0? Well, you could have nothing at all. Or how about this? What about if I had 2 positives and 2 negatives? To make this simple, I'm going to make the negatives red, just sort of to emphasize it. So let me do that over here. How about with my -5, I'm going to do red. I like that. Okay, so I'm going to do the positives, let's say with the green, and some negatives using reds, just to make it more clear. So let's say you wanted another way of writing a 0. How about with, let's say, 6 negatives, then I would have to have the corresponding number. 6 positives, the corresponding number of negatives. Basically what you notice is if the positives and negatives cancel themselves out, you've really got 0. So let's say I wanted to add 3 plus -5. So here's the question. What's 3 plus -5? Well, let's see what that would look like. If I put 3 positives together and along with 5 negatives, notice I've got more negatives when I'm all done, and these kind of cancel themselves out. That's like a 0. So I'm left with more negatives, and how many more? I've got 2 more negatives. So it looks like my answer here is going to be -2. So see if that makes sense to you. With that in mind, try this next one. What if you wanted to do -3 plus a -4? By the way, you do not have to put parentheses around negative numbers, but I'm doing it because some people get confused if they have a plus sign right next to a negative sign. Well, let's see. What would this mean? I've got some negatives, 3 negatives, and then I have, what? Oh, I got more negatives. I got 4 more. Does anything cancel out? Nope. I just have a whole bunch of negatives. So my answer is going to be -7 for this problem. I'm going to write this a little bit differently. I don't like to say it equals that. I just want to use a colon to show it sort of looks like that. So here's one for you to try. See what happens when you have -4 plus -2. If you drew a little picture, what would that look like? You'd have 4 negatives and 2 more negatives. So altogether, you're going to have 6 negatives. All right. How about if we did, let's say, 3 plus 2. All right, you know the answer is 5, right? But if you were going to show it with a picture, you'd have 3 positives and 2 more positives, so you could see the answers. +5. So let's see. In these 2 examples here, -4 plus -2, I'm adding numbers that have the same signs. In other words, they're both negative. So you're just going to have a bigger negative number, right? So you've got 4 negatives and 2 more negatives. So if you add 4 and 2, you're going to have 6 negatives. So if they have the same sign, you know that they're still going to be negative, so it's negative, and then I add the 4 and 2. Now mathematically we say you're adding their absolute values, because the absolute value of -4 is 4 and the absolute value of -2 is 2. I think a lot of times people use that language and they get a little more confused. So visualize it. You've got 4 negatives, 2 more negatives, you're going to have 6 negatives. Visualize this one. You've got 3 positives, 2 more, you're going to have a lot of positives, you add the 3 and 2. And then what happens when you are adding some of each? So let's say we've got 3 plus negative 6. Well, we're going to have, if I do my little color coordinated scheme here, let's say I have some positives, and I'm just going to do the negatives with red. It doesn't really matter what colors you use, or you don't need to have different colors. I can see I've got more negatives here. And these are kind of going to cancel out. So my answer looks like it's going to be negative 3. So what's going on here? What really matters is that I'm adding some positives and negatives. So one of them is going to outweigh the other. Am I going to have more negatives or positives? Well, I've got 6 negatives and only 3 positives. So I'm going to have more negatives. Therefore, my answer is negative. How many more? Well, if you have 6 of one and 3 of the other, you're going to have to subtract, right? And that's exactly the rule. If you've got different signs, now even though I don't write it, this is really the same as a positive 3. If you have different signs, you subtract their absolute values. So I'm just, after I decide the answer is negative, I just take 6 minus 3 to get the negative 3. All right, let's look at a new one. How about if you had negative 7 plus negative 10? Could we do this without drawing a picture? I'm adding 7 negatives to 10 negatives. I'm going to have a whole lot of negatives, right? So my answer's got to be negative. And then how many? Well, I've got 7 and 10 more is negative 17. How about if I've got negative 100 plus negative 200 plus negative 300? I certainly wouldn't want to write out 100 negative signs, 200 more negative signs, and 300 more. But as long as you could at least picture in your head what's going on, you should be all right here. You're adding up a bunch of negatives. So you know the answer is going to be negative. And how many? I've got 100 of them, 200 more of them, 300 more of them. You're just adding 100, 200, and 300 to get negative 600. Now, what about negative 12 plus 3? Let's see. Can you figure out what's going to happen here? I'm going to have 12 negatives and 3 positives. So I have more negatives than positives. So the negatives are going to win out. Now, how many more do I have? Well, just take the difference. 12 minus 3 is 9. If you need to see the picture, you could always do the picture. Right? And then you've got, oops, I did that wrong. Those are all positives. Nope. No, those are negatives. And for the positives, I've got a positive 3. I just didn't use the red, but you can see you end up with 9 more negatives than positives. All right, and it doesn't matter the order. Like if I wrote 3 plus negative 12, it's exactly the same. The negatives outweigh the positives, so the answer is negative. And then again, how many more? 12 minus 3. So if you have different signs, opposite signs, you're going to take the difference of the two numbers. You're going to subtract 12 minus 3. So let's say you've got negative 22 plus 10. All right, I'm adding different signs, right? I've got some negatives and positives, so I just have to see which one outweighs the other. Well, there's more negatives. So I have to take the difference. How many more? 22 minus 10 is 12. What if you've got 32 plus negative 11? Again, I'm adding some positives and negatives. All right? Do the positives or the negatives outweigh the other? Oh, more positives. So my answer is positive. Now, for a positive, you don't need a little bit of plus, need to put any sign down at all. And then what do? We have to subtract 32 minus 11. So you can go over on the side if you can't do that in your head. And the answer is 21. Here are a few problems for you to try. Put it on pause and see if you could do these. All right, so for the first one, they're all negatives. So the answer is negative. And so you've got to add 14 and 22, 36. Here we've got some positives and negatives. So you see which one outweighs the other. I'll have more negatives. And then you take their difference, 22 minus 14. Now, if you can't do that in your head, go over here on the side and you're going to get 8, so it's negative 8. Number 3, you're adding negatives and positives again. This time, which one outweighs the other? Well, I've got more positives, so the answer is positive, and I still have to do 22 minus 14, which I already did over here, so it's positive 8. Negative 26 plus negative 11. They're both negative, so the answer is negative. Add those together. That's how you have a lot of negatives. And the last one, you're adding a positive and a negative, so it's the positives outweigh the other, and so you subtract. And that's it. I hope you learned something. Remember, math is cool.